All right, did everyone get a handout? It's truly a lengthy handout because it didn't print exactly how I wanted to, but it'll still work. But in the end, I think it actually kind of works well because just you can hold it like this. Perfect. All right, does everybody have a handout? Excellent. Well, hi, my name's Lindsay. I am the pastor who primarily works with adult ed. This is sort of our soft opening of adult ed. We didn't have anything planned for this Sunday, and so we thought that this might be a really good Sunday to look at the pastor's statements of faith. Which John will put up on the screen, and you'll have, if you're online, and you guys have handouts of. These are little excerpts from June, Greg and I's statements of faith, and what I find really amazing is I think you'll be surprised how similar they are, especially given that we would have been writing 3 different people in 3 different eras, to use the Taylor Swift term. So I think this will be a really fun thing. We will have to end a little earlier than we usually do. Usually adult ed starts at 9:15 and ends about 10:15. We'll have to end about 10 today because we gotta go. One of us has to preach. We haven't decided yet which one of us is going to preach, but one of us should do that. So I think what I want to do this morning is there's some introduction language at the top here that basically just says what I just said, other than to say, and if you've heard this a bunch, you can ignore this one, but statements of faith are required writing and reflection for candidates for ordination. And then typically in most presbyteries still, it's a required document if you're entering the presbytery. So when I moved to Oregon 3 years ago, even though I wasn't taking a job yet, I was just moving here because I wanted to become a member of the presbytery. They needed my statement of faith and a committee examined it. If you're a candidate, then the entire presbytery will examine your statement of faith, which is just what happened to June about 6 months ago. Poor guy. It used to be that would happen every time you went somewhere. Now it's more, if you're already ordained, usually just a committee will look at it and be like, okay, I don't see anything totally egregious in here. But there are typically kind of topics that they ask you to look at as you're developing your statement of faith. So I started writing mine, when I was 22, 23 years old, thinking about going to seminary. And they give you like little questions that they want you to answer. And when you and I were talking this week, you said in reading yours, you can see where it seems like you're just trying to answer the question, which can be really kind of a bummer. It feels like you're being put in a box, but the questions are good. Yeah.
Related to that, are these what you wrote for this presbytery? And would it be different? Do you aim it differently for different presbyteries?
That's a great question. So Lewis just asked, I'll repeat it in case you didn't hear him. Would you write something different for a different presbytery? You absolutely could. Some pastors will stay where they're at in their current presbytery because they realize what I write for a statement of faith now really only works here. And I'm worried if I tried to enter another presbytery that I wouldn't pass. Mine definitely changed over time, but I think a lot of the themes are still very much the same. When I was 22, I wrote a lot of stuff that I was like, wow, that's just bad. But I don't think about anything you've written before you turn 30 should count. Or at least not, or you should be allowed, you should be allowed to go back and change it. So what I thought we'd do this morning is go through each of, I've divided it up into a couple categories, and not each of us has a thing for each category, but I thought we'd just read them, and then I'm not going to force you to guess, but I do think it could be kind of fun if someone wants to guess who said what, and then that person can justify what they said or tell you when they said it. And then Eileen is not here with us this morning and she's really bummed, but she included hers as well. And we'll get to that hopefully in a little bit. So
can I just say something about
yes, absolutely
of writing? Because I think I wrote mine think just a few years ago, as I was finishing up my ordination process, and this was the same statement of faith that I submitted when I applied for this position, it's called. And I just thought it, like when I was writing it, it definitely, there's like these set of questions or set of criteria that you have to cover as you're writing it. They say, what are your thoughts about baptism? What are your thoughts about the Trinitarian kind of theology and things like that? You kind of have to present it as if you're not answering a question. You have to say, I believe this and I believe this, and you have to kind of make it flow. And I am not necessarily the kind of like, I'm already cynical about institutional things, about bureaucracy. And so like I was being asked to write this and knew that I had to write it well. But I also grew up in the Pacific Presbytery where they kind of knew the kind of pastor I wanted to be and the kind of pastor I was going to be and called to be, and they let me run with it. And so when I was writing my statement of faith, I didn't have much thought. I should have, but I didn't really think too much about which presbytery is going to see this because I've grown up just being affirmed and supported to write in an integrous way. And as I was writing this kind of very like formulaic thing, I realized how actually almost maybe never I'd ever taken the time to sit down and answer these questions and like write it down explicitly. I'd written a ton of papers that kind of covered my beliefs and theologies about these areas, but that the practice of writing the statement of faith was really cool to get me to be like, yeah, this is exactly what I believe in and what my statement of faith is. And so it was a really cool practice to do that. Yeah, fun.
So June, you wrote this before you knew you were going to be applying for a job in the Presbyterian Cascades.
Yes.
So when it was time to submit your statement of faith, did you tweak what you had previously written?
So I actually, that was a big question of mine because I knew that I'd written it knowing the kind of like progressive seminary I was coming out of and where the Presbyterian I grew up in. And I was nervous because I had heard that the Cascade was a little bit more maybe conservative and kind of would not be so welcome to me. And I really, really had to sit there and trust that it didn't matter which Presbyterian I was writing it for, that this really was what I wanted to do. And so I just did it. I didn't like maybe grammar, but like nothing theologically.
Well, I'm glad you changed it for grammar. I mean,
So my experience is totally different. I was the chairperson as an elder of the committee that worked with people who wanted to be pastors. So I was in my 20s. So CPM is, I actually am so old, they called it candidates committee. And then the denomination changed the language. So I was reading statements of faith and learning from them and formulaic, whoever said formulaic, from the beginning. I never wrote one. I was an elder from a church and on the committee. Presbyterian committees have to have equal number of elders and pastors on them to be a true committee of the church. And so my experience has always been to learn the formula. You have to have something about the sacraments, about the Trinity, about worship, about the church. I mean, you know that. And so, and I would grow up in the time of the fighting around gay and lesbians, who owns church property. I mean, it was a horrible time to be coming under through the system. And so every time there was a vote on the floor of Presbytery about a candidate, often the Presbytery fought its battles through the candidate. And so statement of faiths were like really important, and you learned to say words that you didn't have a lot of passion for, but that would get you by. So I've had to relearn my life. So to answer your question, my statement of faith when I wrote for my home presbytery is very different than what you see now.
I use the word inclusion a lot coming up as a gay pastor during the time when we were arguing about gays and lesbians. I remember using the word inclusion a lot and getting a lot of questions on the floor of what does inclusion mean?
Yeah, right.
And literally right then, a squirrel ran through the Presbytery meeting and everyone was like, a squirrel! And people kind of forgot, and I was like, of all God's creatures, and they ended debate. And I was like, that's how I got ordained.
My question is this your current statement of faith?
It's my current one, yeah. So this is the one that I did for, like, I just went back and copied, edit, pasted what I sent to the search committee when I applied for a job here.
So I had to do the same thing as Lindsay. So what you see is what I gave to this church and the presbytery 15 years ago with the few tweaks.
Okay, so this isn't something you wrote this summer or?
No.
This, okay.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna read, so under Word and Sacrament, I'm gonna read this first one, which is those first two paragraphs, and then we'll let you guess who said it, alright? I believe that by partaking in the bread of life and the cup of salvation offered and given to us by Jesus, we are given the necessary sustenance, both for our own lives and for the life of the kingdom. And through baptism, we affirm and claim this radical life of love, compassion, and healing, modeled by Jesus as our own, affirming the invitation and our acceptance into this new way of life. When we are baptized, we acknowledge that the sustenance for this new life is the bread of life and cup of salvation. I believe that within the narratives, stories, songs, psalms, hymns, and revelations found in scripture, we are equipped to seek out not only its relevance to the historical and contemporary church, but equipped to reclaim the interpretations of scripture that have been used to marginalize, oppress, and enslave people groups over time. June. Yeah.
Yes, that is,
That is
I mean, yeah, that is pretty accurate. I think that is so good.
Do you remember when you would have written this what year?
I wrote this in 2023. Nice. Yeah,
Okay, so you were in California.
Nice grammar.
Excellent job.
Tweets.
The punctuation is perfect.
your grammar.
Punctuation is perfect. All right, I'm gonna read another one. Scripture reminds us of things we forget. God is God, and the idols within us and in society and even the church are not. The Holy Spirit that inspired the writers of scripture inspires readers and hearers and singers and doers. The communion of saints and our church confessions are evidence of this abundance. The word is present with the sacraments. Justly Christ instituted baptism and communion for us to remember God, our belovedness, and the kingdom we share. We know by these signs and seals, as we are cleaned by water, we are new, and as bread and wine feeds us, we are sustained unto eternal life.
That's great.
No, that's Lindsay.
Yeah, that's easy.
It's Lindsay.
It's me.
Can I say what I love about this? Because one of the things that I find, I don't know what June and Lindsay believe, that we pastors often don't like to write or say anything about confessions. Some of them are horrible. And we have to say we believe and accept them, right? So Lindsay writes, it's beautiful sentence that I just really want to lift up for all of you, because I think she handles the difficulty of confessions really well. The last sentence of that first paragraph covers the communion of saints in our church's confessions are evidence of the abundance. I think that's just such a wonderful way to talk about confessions. I don't recommend you read any of them. The younger ones are better than the new.
It was also a fun, sneaky way to imply confessions.
It's skating.
Confessions are like, we do have a book of confessions, and some of them are good and some of them are not great. And also like our confessions, like what we confess together. So that's a good way to,
Yeah,
like,
that's great.
like, how do you be formulaic? How do you be authentic, but not reveal more of yourself than you have to, if that makes sense? Like, not to be inauthentic, but there is, I think, this internal struggle to feel like I don't have to give all of myself and everything I believe to a presbytery of however many hundred people who've never met me before. So that was the one. I want to talk, so June and I both, yeah.
Question, I don't, in both of these statements, the term kingdom.
That's what I was gonna talk about. Yeah.
And that's, I've heard that more and more of late. And for an old timer, it's something new, so I'm wondering what. Just tell me a little bit about what you're implying when you use the word kingdom.
You wanna
I
go
think
first
I
and
know.
Could you please repeat, can't hear anything back here.
Can't hear the question, Scott. He's asking about the word kingdom, and both June and I use the word kingdom interchangeably for the word kingdom. You wanna speak to that first?
Sure, yeah, I can talk about it in kind of, for me, it's a little bit twofold. I think there's a really kind of on the surface way of word kingdom, especially in today's day and age, has just a ton of implications and attachments to it, especially when we talk about Christian kingdom and Christendom, right? There's a lot of violence and histories of genocide that are attached and associated with this idea of Christian political power. And so the avoidance of that language is a real emphatic, not just like, oh, we should have used that word, but an emphatic, oh, God's kingdom is very different. And so sometimes I still use the language kingdom, but it's that we are trying to make it emphasize that it is not the kind of kingdom that we see in the world, or even in the stories that they're talking about kingdom. And then secondly, and I think this is the bigger piece for me, is that what God's kingdom is a community of kinship, is a community of people who believe that God's children and God, the creator, that we have all been created to be kin, that we are brothers and sisters and siblings with one another. And that is the radical way of being that the kingdom of heaven is. And so I think that is why and again, this is to help with semantics, right? This is like, we're translating from translations already. And I think kingdom is one way that that I use.
So if you look at original translations, would you find words that are more like this word kingdom as opposed to a kingdom?
So likely with the word kingdom, it's going to be usually translated directly or literally with the kingdom word, like the royal kingdom. But surrounding it, the idea of kinship and bloodline of a kin that's not blood kin is a very common theme from the Hebrew Bible through the Christian Bible, and that's where this idea of kin.
I think it's our I think it's our emphasis, our understanding that the emphasis and the understanding would have been different when it was written. So sort of, and I think it's very current to now, because how many of you have since been to No King's protest? And so using the word king feels more akin to empire in the Bible, and the Bible was very anti-empire. And there also is that beauty of gender neutrality. I think it's a better reflection of God, that we worship a triune God. And so in a way, we worship a kinship God. And so, but I do still use kingdom when I feel like it's understood correctly. Does that make sense?
If you want to read a really dry and boring book, I recommend God's Undersecretaries, because it's the way the King James Bible was written. And King James forces these four different groups within the kingdom of England to come together and write a Bible. And he basically, to translate it from the Greek, and basically says to them, whenever possible, you will highlight and uplift Lord and King. And so part of what we're dealing with when June talked about translations, the Bible translation made me think of this, is that God's Undersecretaries is the boring dry book about the writing in the King James Bible, but it's the translation. So we're still dealing with what happened in the 1600s when the King James Bible became the first translation of English from the Greek.
That's because they have political things. You want to unify the country.
He was trying to unify the country, so he had the Protestants and the Catholics, and I can't remember the four different groups now, but yes, anyway. So king is a part of the problem that these two are pointing to.
And I think it is more current right now. Like, I definitely don't think I use this in my original statement of faith, but I've used it more recently, and to cite adult ed. Elaine Park really went into a really lovely explanation of it last year, one of our biblical scholars, explaining that basically what I just said, that it's not that we're anti-kingdom, it's that we're not understanding the word kingdom the way that they would have intended it, and so kinship feels closer, or kingdom feels closer. Does that make sense?
Do we call it realm?
You can call it whatever you want, Louis, yeah.
Realm would actually be, realm would be actually also close to the Greek translation.
Our church database is called Realm.
Yeah, think about why they chose that.
So that's what I think of. I think of like, oh, where do I find this person's address?
In
Oh.
the realm.
So let's move on to something even more lovely than kin. Let's move on to sin. June, will you read that first one?
Okay. God said this created world was good, and humankind very good. When we forget that we are God's beloved creation, this is when we sin. This shows up in smaller sins, harsh comments said thoughtlessly to a neighbor, and in larger systemic injustices.
And Greg, will you read the next one? We'll read them both, and then you guys can guess.
I believe God's justice, which Christ often pointed to in his life and teachings, is necessary because of God's gift of free will. God's justice then is necessary because of human beings' choice of sin over being faithful to God. When we sin, we turn away from God. When we work for God's justice, we are being faithful.
So those both have some similar wording in them, but they are two separate things. The one that's in regular print and the one that's in italicized print. Do you want to guess? Or is guessing about sin too? Too scary. The first one is mine. The second one is Greg's. It's a, are you like, wait, is it mine? Yeah, not everybody got one for
Okay.
for everything. We
No,
all
I figured.
We all said something about the church at the end, so that's good. We all said something about the church.
I'm a big free will guy.
What's that mean, yeah?
It's just, for me, I have my theological problem, believe it or not, is more with creation. And all the pain and suffering it causes. I get human sin. I don't understand why God created tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanoes and why creation. So for me, believe it or not, free will even represents creation. That when God created free will, it was all for all creation, not just human beings. And so that's why I'm a big free will person. But I think also that's where our choices are about our sin and our goodness. And I don't want to miss both. So I'm afraid. I don't preach about it, but that's kind of my theological underpinning for me. Because then when I make bad choices, I don't want to blame someone else. Part of that has to do with the house I grew up, right? That was my dad and my mom both teaching. That was a choice, that was your choice. That wasn't an accident or whatever the case may be.
It's interesting that you use word justice more than once. How would you define God's justice?
I think it goes back to what these two have beautifully said about kingdom. I think when truly we see each other as equals in relationship with each other through God, then I think that's God's justice. I think it's when we choose power over or greed over the ability to encourage and support. I think your lack of justice.
So I read this, you use the word we several places. When we forget, so on. So who is we? We've been traveling internationally. Who is we?
I feel like we as humankind, that's, for me, it's understanding sin is directly related to understanding goodness, and that, in the creation story, we have God saying that creation is very good. Actually saying that creation is good and then humans are very good. And I think it's that reminder that humankind collectively are very good. And I do believe God sees each one of us also as very good. And so it's a we, Yeah, that's the we. I don't know that I could. You could I would certainly say it as an I. If I have sinned, but I think there's also, so like the smaller sin, the harsh comment you said to a neighbor. The larger systemic injustices, I love that we confess as we. Whether, regardless of what level we could argue we participated in.
Because can we then include Hindus and
Yeah, I would certainly think so. I like, Eileen, almost every time she does the confession of sin, will say something like, we are confessing for ourselves and for those who don't know that they need to confess. So that sense that we are, as the church, leading in confession, leading in saying that we've participated in wrongdoing. And I love that. I actually think our confession of sin and assurance of forgiveness as a part of liturgy is the very best thing we do in worship. It's the best thing we can offer the world right now, is to say, like, mea culpa or whatever. Whatever feels right for you to say, that I and we have participated in wrongdoing and want to be restored.
I might,
And you have a good collective thought.
yeah, I've talked about this a lot, or in general, in the Korean language, when I'm talking to someone else and I say my mom, the word that I use for my is ao. And that is a natural kind of, like, just a way of learning, that when I say, oh, my family, like, in English, I mean my family, but the Korean translation that I use is our family, right? And so, and that our is kind of used in various contexts, and I think you guys will notice when we talk about, like, school pride, right? I think we have, like, when I say we're really excited about the upcoming game or whatever, we're representing this collective community, and that community changes, I think, when the word we is in different contexts. As you're traveling internationally, there's a ton of people that you see that are, like, doing God's justice in the world, and you're like, oh yeah, those, like, we are aligned with that we. And so I think when I use the language, like, if I said, when we work for God's justice, we are being faithful, that we for me represents the community of anybody that is working for God's justice. Right, like that we doesn't have these specific kind of, like, markers of who it represents. It's just kind of a collective, like, it's we. And I think it's what that we is doing that represents who we is. And I think when we use we language, we are claiming who it is that we align ourselves with, which communities and which families that we are a part of, right? Including from Muslim.
I think that's part of the emphasis in having pastors write a statement of faith and submit one regularly, or at least submit one if they want to move to another space, is to ask yourself, who do you align yourself with? I went to Duke for seminary, and Duke has a great deal of Methodists, and my CPM was like, she wants to be a Methodist. And I was like, no, I don't want to be a Methodist. I just don't want to go to Presbyterian seminary right now, where a lot of what you're doing is arguing about gay people. I want to go have an Orthodox education that's more centrist than having this argument. And I had a really lovely experience at a place where I was in the minority. It did help me realize, oh, I really am Presbyterian. Like, I hung out with Congregationalists, I hung out with the Baptists, I hung out with the Episcopalians, and I'm like, I think I'm just Presbyterian. Like, this is where I align myself. And there's a lot of things that I love about other traditions. I'm a big meditator, but yeah, in the end, I think this is who I align myself with. I think that's a good way to say it. I want to move on to Jesus, because there'll be some more we as we go through that. I'm going to read this first one, and then I'll have June read the second one. I believe that the work of restoration is and has been actualized through the modeling of a community brought together by the life, death, resurrection, and love of Jesus Christ. From the Hebrew Bible through the Pauline letters, we find that Jesus is both wholly human and wholly God. and has come to earth to be the restored kingdom, to be the surety of what is, or what is and is to come, and to communally invite the world to be a part of that work.
I believe that God is revealed in Jesus Christ. I believe that Christ is the great teacher. Christ teaches us to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. We've been given wisdom literature about Christ or the Gospels and letters found in the New Testament because it was essential that every generation have stories and teachings to continue to learn and grow as God's beloved children. I feel like mine are really easy. It's my language. I use kingdom.
Does anyone want to guess? We kind of just gave it away.
First one is choose, the second one is Lindsay.
No, the second one is Greg, yeah.
My keyword is if you see the word teacher or teacher,
Oh.
you almost can say it's probably right. I was a special ed teacher when I began to write all this stuff years ago. I do love that Lindsay and I both pick up the idea of the Gospels and the Pauline letters and, you know.
That one's June.
Oh, that was June.
That was June,
Oh,
yeah.
I thought you did, sorry.
What are the Pauline letters?
So the letters of Paul. I know, and whenever we say Pauline, I'm like, oh, I love Pauline.
You can go both ways.
I would have liked her a lot better than I like Paul.
Okay, actually, this reminds me a lot of, wrote some legislation for federal legislation. And you have to be very careful about what you say because it can be interpreted incredibly differently. So you are writing for an audience.
Yeah,
It isn't necessarily about you,
Right.
for the audience.
yeah, like we said before, there's a balance to writing for you and honoring yourself and not being disingenuous, but also one, needing to answer the questions you've been asked and showcasing who you're aligning yourself with. Who's your we? Are you in this we? Yeah, there is some legislation familiarities, I bet, Jerry, yeah.
Jerry, I once saw a woman being examined by the Florida Presbyterian who was mature when she went to seminary and was well known. And she wrote her statement of faith with poetry for herself and gave it to the Presbyterian.
Did she
That was a
pass?
very long meeting. Because she wrote it for herself.
Yeah.
It was her statement of faith. It was beautiful. Oh my goodness. It went on for an hour. Finally, the moderator said, this has got to stop. Anybody, you know, part of it was people were loving it and really wanted to hear from her. And the other part were like, this is stupid. You know, people are like, this is incompetent. Why are we allowing it? So
Yeah.
it was so interesting.
It's sometimes in confirmation classes, you'll ask, you know,
Oh,
12,
yeah.
14, 15-year-olds to write a statement of faith. And in one of the churches that I worked with, I did this with some students, and I had this wonderful 12-year-old girl who's just bright as can be, and she wrote her statement of faith as though she was Amelia Earhart. And I was like, this is so amazing, you are so wonderful, don't ever go to seminary. But you do not let anyone say anything about this. Yeah, but she did pass, right? It was
Oh,
a
yeah.
meeting.
Church.
We usually have to do this in a page too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. I think hers is a little longer than a page. Yeah, we'll do church. I'll do the first one.
I made my font smaller on mine.
I've definitely seen some that aren't a page. They're 2 pages. It's really annoying though, when you get it on a page and then a governing body takes it and sends it on and then it doesn't fit on a page because they changed it. I'm like, no, it's on a page. I believe that the history of the world is fraught with moments and periods of further fracturing and inbreaking kingdom. And through Jesus, we have been both redeemed to restore this work, and we have been entrusted to maintain faith that the redeemed kingdom draws nearer and nearer to earth each generation. And I believe the church represents that generational lineage, a lineage of believers across time who have participated in the work of the redeemed kingdom, building a space for holistic healing, respite, and both individual and community restoration.
The purpose of the church is to pull more and more chairs up to the feasting table, to share in the abundance of life, the good news, goodness of God. Sake of resting, gifts from God.
I believe the church is where God's people gather to worship, to confess, to learn, to co-create, to celebrate, and to always be reminded of God's love, justice, grace, and mercy to the glory of God. If you see co-create, it's all usually mine.
And celebrate. That's
Celebrate.
great.
Yeah.
Celebrate, for great glory of God.
I love, I actually don't know who wrote, but I actually love this, pulling more chairs up to the feasting table.
Yeah,
I just
that's nice.
love that image.
That's
Yeah. I don't know what you're from.
That one, because that one's a big one for how do I describe inclusion? And how do I describe inclusion without, as Greg said, having the presbytery fight on the floor? Really, no one can argue with you if you've written poetry for you as your statement of faith. They can argue about it, but they can't argue with you. And no one would argue with bringing or giving
Well,
up chairs. for
But they
other
might
people.
have, I was on CPM,
Mhm.
and we had, I remember one. It wasn't poetry, it was very poetic,
Mhm.
and one of the criticisms was, can you just say what you mean?
Mhm.
And she said, another she said, I just did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too when you're being questioned on it, like how to answer. I remember somewhere in my candidacy, not for my last one. But because you get sort of quizzed on it as you move along in the ordination process, and I said something smart, and then I felt like I needed to say something else, and I ended up going, yeah, that's it. So I was like, perfect, there you go. Should have written that down. Oh, yeah, that's it.
Louis, it is an interesting practice because a part of me, and I think it has to do with a little bit of the time of day and age. Some of the Presbyterians did not care about my statement of faith, I don't think. Right. They saw a 30-year-old, 29-year-old Asian American, diverse, went to good schools and wants to be a pastor. And they wanted to do everything they could to make sure that I'm able to become. And so there was this weird balance of like, is this writing practice for myself or is it for someone else to receive? And I do still need to say all the things because I still need to make all the markers. But I don't know that too many people are going to be a stickler about exactly what it is that I write. And so there was this kind of like push and pull in my own writing this about how much do I reveal of myself in this process, because I know there's a desire to make sure that I can and will be a pastor because of what's happening to, how many young seminary. But I think it was important for me that I do take it so seriously because it was so important. But again, I think within the process, it felt a little bit like, oh, I wonder if this even matters, right? But I know that it did.
Yeah. And the presbyteries and CPMs, all those committees have to sort of play two roles where they're both cheerleader and gatekeeper. And it, depending on the era, when you went to seminary and how many pastors there were at the time, often played a part in how hard they went on the gatekeeper piece and how hard they went on the cheerleader piece. I feel like I got way more gatekeeper than I wanted, but nature of the time, yes.
Do any of the three of you feel as though you were manipulated into
Ooh, that's a
saying
great question.
something for the audience that we were in front of, that you were going to say the right thing for their ears and maybe not as authentic as you believe?
So this is a great question, Judy, and I'm gonna give you a really great short answer. So Judy asked, did any of us feel manipulated in having to say something that maybe we didn't believe? The advice I was given was when on the floor of presbytery, when you say yes, if your answer is yes, just say yes, don't say anything else. So yes. What about you?
I will say I've never been manipulated to like lie, but I have, I think, felt the need to be more wise about the way that I'm talking about my authentic
Yeah, that's
integrity,
right, yeah.
like in what I believe in. And I don't know, because I don't have my full statement of faith in front of me. I actually think I didn't write about the confessions at all. Because, yeah, I don't think I would have been able to authentically write about my opinion about the confessions and my attachment and devotion to the confessions, in the way that they might have wanted me to say it. And so I actually just didn't include, I don't know that I included it, or if I did, it was probably a brief piece about its importance in history, right? But yeah, like, I think as pastors, especially, I mean, sorry, I'll speak for myself, and I know it means the same for the pastors as well, but only for myself, I can say pastoral integrity is like almost like the motivating factor for why I became a pastor, is because I saw so many and heard so many things that didn't align with what I felt like the pastors authentically believed in. And so for me, in writing even, pastoral integrity, ensuring that everything that I write are things that I believe in, have always been written. So I have maybe like code switched and had to be a little bit, wordsmithy, but I've never felt like I've had to lie.
Yeah, I've never lied, but.
Yeah, sorry,
but
not
they
that
will-
you're lying.
They will, like, you will feel manipulated to write more about a specific topic, because that might have been like the hot topic of the day.
Yeah, that would,
And then-
Yes.
that would be my answer, because it was the formulaic. I mean, I bet if I look at my original, if I could find it, I bet I had to have something about the confessions, which I would never have written about. I mean, it just had no interest in it to me. So the formulaic piece is manipulative, but what I wrote, never.
Yeah.
Well, never say never. I don't remember feeling that way. Let me say it that way.
I have a positive spin on Judy's question, and I'm gonna start by saying, we're running low on time, but I would love for you to look at Eileen's. Eileen writes really beautifully, and you get one more pastor and one more era perspective. And one of the things that she does is she sort of intros with what are her influences now, people, traditions. And so I wondered if each of us might say if there was an influence when we think about writing our statement of faith.
It's a great. Probably for me, Anne Weems was probably my biggest influencer for language.
Poetic.
Yeah, I'm not a poet, but her words, I loved Anne Weems. I have all her books still, and what she wrote.
Do you know when we lived? Think so?
Yeah, so she wrote in the nineties, elder from a church in St. Louis. Anyway, that's probably for this statement of faith, Anne Weems' language would be my biggest influence. For script, for theological. Who wrote, anyway, I can't think of the name. I can tell you it's a blue book.
That's why I organize my books by color.
Yeah.
I am still a hardcore Frederick Buechner nerd. My parents were Frederick Buechner nerds. All of the pastors I've loved have been Frederick Buechner nerds. I think he's a good mix of the narrative and the theology. He was a pastor. You can Google him if you don't know who I'm talking about. He's got a bajillion books. Frederick Buechner was a big one for me, but I can also think of kind of random moments where someone did something and it made me think of like this image of pulling up more chairs to the feasting table. And they aren't necessarily people whose names I even remember. Just thinking about that and how the influence of the universal church is really, or on us, yeah.
I missed the name of the.
Frederick Buechner.
Okay.
Yeah, Frederick Buechner. You got one?
I went to school at Vanderbilt, and my concentration was Black religion and culture, and so I got to study a lot of the current living, like on Presbyterian ministers and Reformed theologians. And Katie Cannon, who is the first Black woman Presbyterian PCUSA minister, she was crucial in advancing the Presbyterian to where it is today in terms of racial reparations. And so in terms of my academia, that is my biggest influence. But theologically, I think I wanted to say this, but I don't think everybody knows this. The Lord's Prayer for me is like almost everything about, it's where I get the language of kingdom. It's where I get the belief of kingdom of heaven and earth. It is the God's will on earth. May God's will on earth be done in heaven. It is the prayer of Christ. Pray. And so that prayer for me.
It's a Presbyterian.
The Lord's Prayer for me really, really like influenced a lot.
Well, we're a couple minutes past 10, so we're gonna wrap up. I would encourage y'all to keep reading this, that it's online now, you can read it at any point. Ask questions, ask Eileen questions. Eileen has some really lovely thoughts here that are, I think you'd really enjoy. And I want you to know that next week we have someone coming and talking about the labyrinth for adult ed, or the practice of using the labyrinth. The following week, who's the fifth? I forget. Someone open their brochure. We have to
Gemma,
look at the
your-
brochure.
your-
Oh, yes, talking about, the
Ukraine.
Ukraine protests that have been here in Portland, the Saturday Ukraine protests. The following week, we have someone who is the presenter for the women's retreat is coming and giving a little taste of the women's retreat, Amy Moiso. She also worked for the National Office in Social Witness Policy, so she can tell you a lot about what's going on there.
Might tell you about her. I chaired candidates and preparation committee for years at Presbyterian. She had the most incredible statement of faith I have ever heard in my life.
Well, there you
You'll see that when you hear her.
Well, we'll ask her to submit it. We
So you can-
need your W-9 and your statement. Thank you all so much for your really good questions. I hope it wasn't you again soon. And thank you both. This was fun.
It was fun.
Thank you.
Lindsay, whose idea was this?
Yours, me, somebody. Okay, some ideas. Next time.
I mean, I was like 59 years.